Hey everyone, this is Pittsburgh Pat. Welcome to my channel, and I'm here with Leah Klocko and Andy Hickly. How are you guys?
Good. Hi.
I'm doing great.
We're going to talk about the new production of Sleeping Beauty. Leah is what is your official title? Costumer or
Yes, costumer.
costumer? Okay. And Andy's got several hats in this. He's a director, writer. Well, you wrote an
Yes.
adaptation, right? So
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
Then fight director, right?
Yeah. I kind of the fights were a collaborative effort between myself and our fight captain Michael Menendez.
Gotcha, gotcha. And
Mhm.
then okay, so you have three credits on the bill, on the playbill, is that right?
Yeah. They
Okay.
they credited me as production designer too, which is very nice. I mean, I did come in with a lot of visual ideas. Um, but that was the first time I've ever been credited as a production designer, so that was fun.
Well, that's pretty cool. And you've been
Yeah.
doing this, yeah, for a long time. So I know Andy, you've been like in stage theater productions for how long now? Like how many years?
Oh boy. How long ago was fourth grade?
Okay,
Uh,
great, great. So you don't have to
so
tell us.
it's
And
probably
then
20 some years, give or
and
take.
then Leah, is this something that you do all the time as well?
Yes, I started costuming in 1999,
Got
so 25 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow, I
Fantastic.
didn't realize it was that long.
I know it's amazing when we start talking in terms of decades. All right, so what I'd like to do is just talk in a general way about the production so that people that are interested in going to the production know how to do that, how to get tickets, where it is, and all that kind of stuff. And then after that, maybe we can get into some more detail about like what I saw on Sunday, which was a lot of fun. Yeah. So let's do that.
Absolutely.
All right, so where is the play?
So the play is at 523 Lincoln Avenue at the Margaret Partee Performing Arts Center, which is a store that's been converted into the Pittsburgh Savoyards headquarters in Bellevue. I think it used to be a black and gold store, and they've worked to make it kind of a black box theater. One part, costume warehouse, one part build space for their main stage shows that happen at the Andrew Carnegie Free Library Music Hall and the Pittsburgh Masonic Center. It's a cool little spot, 523 Lincoln Avenue. Long answer to a short question.
That's right on the main shopping street in Bellevue. So
That's
if
right.
you know Bellevue at all, that's where it is. And when are the next two performances or next three performances, right?
The next three, yeah, last three, which
Yeah.
is crazy to think about. Our final shows are going to be this Friday at 7:30, and then Saturday we have a 2:30 show and a 7:30 show. So Saturday you got two chances to see it.
Fantastic. And then so how much does it cost?
$15 ticket. It's not
What
too
a,
bad.
no, what a deal. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
And how long is the runtime? Like how many hours?
Yeah, it runs about 80 minutes, an hour 20. That's including our 15-minute intermission.
Okay.
Somebody pointed out it runs just about the length of a Disney animated film. So for anyone with younger kids, it's like the perfect runtime for maybe shorter attention spans.
Well, it's funny you mention that. So, like, I'd love to hear your takes on this. I sat in the front row and at
Mm,
the first act, and there was a family behind me with some younger children, and so it was great. I thought like to see um kids of that age be at a live theatrical performance because
yeah.
it's all electronics, right? So like this is actually and and it's a really intimate space. So like you're involved, like you're right there. Did that like
Yeah.
inform anything? Like Leah, I want to get you in the conversation. Did that inform anything like when you were doing it, how close everything was and how everybody was going to see you know,
Well, costume wise, you have to consider, I mean, there's been a running joke from a costumer that I knew that said, as long as it looks okay from 50 feet away on horseback, you're good. Because on a normal stage, you're pretty far away
yeah.
on a regular proscenium stage. Now, in a black box or a theater where it's this close up, I mean, you can't get away with that because people can see because they're only feet away.
Yeah.
Uh, Most of my stuff anyway. I don't cheat that much. It looks good up close and far away, so I really didn't have to do anything differently for this show.
Gotcha, gotcha. And Andy, when you were writing the adaptation of the play,
Yeah.
did you have children specifically in mind when you were doing that?
Um, like yes and no to an extent. Like I've worked in children's entertainment for a long time. Um, and just kind of the way I've always geared it is kind of it's like a 50-50 split. I try to include stuff tonally, subject wise, that's going to appeal to a younger audience, but include elements that are going to engage you know, slightly older audiences as well. Um, the way I always like to frame it is like it's a family show. There's something in it for everyone. So like you can bring everybody there, and hopefully, if I've done my job right, you know, every single member of that family can engage with it and enjoy it, even if like it's in slightly different ways.
And I think you pulled that off really well with this show because there are jokes that the little ones really like, and there are jokes that the little ones may not necessarily get, but the adults like. And so it's a real nice balance. As an adult, you don't feel like, oh, I'm sitting here so the kids are entertained.
Absolutely, thank you. That was the goal. I somebody at the production also said like the idea of like it kind of invites the child in all of us to play, and I love that it appeals to that sense of whimsy no matter how old you are.
Well, when you pick a fairy tale, we know that we're coming into this with that sort of mentality. But so I want to talk about some specifics now. So this is like the
Yeah.
spoiler part of the interview. So if anybody is going to go, and when you guys go, if just pause this video, come back to it after you've seen the show, and you'll be in on all the jokes. And if you're far enough away that you may not be able to see, you can just keep watching because we're going to talk about specifics now. So thanks for
Yeah.
Speaking of being far enough away, or did we do all of our live streams, or is there still a live stream coming up?
So I checked on the website and it looks like the live streams are done, unfortunately,
Okay.
but I'm gonna check back later. For anyone listening, check the website, check the live stream ticket link. It might go live again. I
that
don't
would
know
be
if they're gonna
fantastic.
be cycling the videos from last weekend when we did the live stream. So if you're far away, please check because we'd love for you to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you're like me and you have a cold, you can like go and you can see it and not infect anybody. But
Mm-hmm.
I actually did with Leah, what you were talking about. I was in the front row for the first act, and then I went up top, like in the back row for the second act to kind of see the whole picture because I felt like I was really close to the action sometimes because there was a doorway where a lot of people were coming in and out. So I wanted to give them a little bit more room. But yeah, so some of the people had elements of costumes all ready to go, right? Like the man who played the king, the actor who
Yeah.
played the king, doesn't he do like a Renaissance fair kind of thing in his spare time? So yeah,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
so he had some elements of that. That must have been very helpful.
Yeah,
Oh, it
Michael
was.
Menendez has worked in Ren fairs for decades and has accumulated a lot of Renaissance garb in that time.
And so it was very helpful because he not only brought the stuff that he was wearing, most of the two capes were the only things that weren't his that he
Okay.
wore. Um, but he also brought some stuff that no longer fit him that I was able to use on other actors. So that was very helpful,
Yeah, I was gonna
especially for
say,
a small budget.
well, that's one of the things I wanted to hit on. I mean, we don't have to talk about specific dollar figures, but I think for anybody out there that's thinking about like writing or thinking about like being involved in like they have to know like a budget is a very big consideration, right? So like for instance, there are three Maleficent is like I don't think you name her though, right? Do you name the dark
No,
fairy?
she's just called the Wicked Fairy since Maleficent was like the trademark name given to that
Ah,
character, his name. Yeah.
gotcha, gotcha.
Mm.
So the Wicked Fairy has three minions basically,
Mhm.
and I
Yeah.
and the way they were costumed was very clever, I thought. And very economical, you told me as well after the production, which is wonderful. This is exactly the type of thing you need to do, right? Sort of.
Well,
Before
right.
before Leah goes into the details, I just have to say, like, all of the kudos and like all of the applause to Leah for how she was able to construct the monster costumes, because I know when we were talking about it, I was a little vague and a little kind of like uh you know a little up in the air about what that might look like. And she found the coolest, efficient way to create that look. And I'm just like, amazing, amazing. So, yay, Leah.
I I was so happy you liked it, Andy, because I was thinking, so we have these, they're monsters, and later they become the hedge.
Yes.
And they had to be able to change fairly quickly. They had to be able to move in it, do some fighting in it, be safe with that. Andy had a thought originally that the monsters would be kind of um, like a woven fabric, a slightly furry woven, kind of almost an Afghani kind of fabric. Um, and I had one Afghan like that, but I didn't have three, and I didn't want to cut the one I had. So then I was thinking, how do I make hoods? How do I make costumes that are cheap? Because I was afraid of going over budget because we have a lot of characters. And I was driving one day and just came up with, wait, how do I make a quick hood? So the hoods are actually t-shirts.
Mm.
They're small t-shirts. I sewed the bottom together, cut out a hole for where their face goes, and then cut up the neck and sleeves to just look like pieces. So those are t-shirts. And then for the actual body, they just have on black leggings and black long sleeve shirts. And then I bought an XXL t-shirt and cut sort of pieces out of it to make it look kind of furry. And it's one of the things I like best about costuming, which is solving problems. Costuming is
Mm.
not so much about sewing, but about solving problems. This person has to go from this to this in this amount of time on this budget. How do I make that happen? And so I'm actually very proud of the monsters. They're fun.
Yeah, they look
They were.
amazing. Fabulous job with them.
Thank you.
Yeah, the same family I was talking about behind me at one point, the little girl said something like, it's scary. And I'm like, it's supposed to be scary. I mean, it wasn't too scary though, because then the humor came in. Like, Andy, you had a real great balance of like tension and humor. It was a lot funnier than I thought it originally was going to be. I really did. I mean, there's humor in the Disney movie, but it's really more dramatic. There was a lot of fun stuff. There was a reference to a joke that Gandalf makes in Lord of the Rings at the very beginning, right?
Yes.
You want to tell him?
Yeah, at the very beginning, I thematically liked the idea of the good fairy, um, kind of always being late. It was a nice way of explaining. I'll back up a little bit. I knew the space the show was going to be performed in before I started writing, which was a huge benefit, because it helped me kind of shape a lot of things, even in the writing, that kind of saved me some work down the road. And one of those things I knew at the very beginning was I wanted to have a smaller cast so that the stage didn't feel so crowded and so jam packed with like so many people that you can't move.
Hmm.
And in every version of the fairy tale, except for maybe the Disney one, there's several fairies. In Charles Perrault, there's seven fairies, including the Wicked Fairy. In the Brothers Grimm, there's 13.
Mm.
And I kept trying to think of like, okay, good fairies to bad fairy. How do we want to do that split? Is it going to be an even four like in Disney? And then the thing I kept coming back to was, there's in Tchaikovsky's ballet, there's only one of the good fairies that really does anything. It's the lilac fairy. She's the one that softens the curse that it will be sleep, not death. Um, but to that end, uh, I wanted to kind of explain away why we're only going to see these two fairies, not all the other ones, because there needed to be a reference to how many fairies are there so that we understand that one of them has not been invited. And so, thematically, to get to that point, this is a very long answer to a short question. I was like, you know what? She's always going to show up exactly when she's needed because that's how that character always works. You know, like these kind of Deus Ex Machina fairy godmothers, they always show up right in the nick of time, exactly when they need to be there to solve a problem. So the way I kept thinking about it was Gandalf's line from Lord of the Rings: "A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins, nor is he early. He always arrives precisely when he means to." And I just thought that would be a little funny tip of the hat to the Lord of the Rings, while also keeping that thematic component in line.
And the great thing about what you did with that was and this is a spoiler, so if you haven't, this is a spoiler,
Mm.
is that, you wove that into the plot so that it was a device. So it actually affects that characteristic of that character affects the plot. And,
Yeah,
it's not just a throwaway, like, nod to, another intellectual property. You owned it and you brought it in and made that part of this plot, which I thought was really
yeah.
clever. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my thought is like something like that. If it means something thematically in the plot, it has to show up a couple times. I've got like a little bit of like a rule of three. So that thing, that reference to the fairy being late shows up at least three times, if not more.
yeah,
The Rose and Princeling say to each other like, "If I'm late, then I'll wait." That shows up three times again. Like if it means something, it has to be heard more than once.
yeah.
Um,
You introduce it once, you reinforce it the second time, the third time.
yep.
And
Third time.
it's poetry, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking of poetry, so like when the good fairy did like run from upstage to, I'm sorry, from downstage to upstage at one point, the lace or the gossamer or whatever that material was that she was using looked to me just like wings. Like it was really well done, Leah. Like it was just like it was very ephemeral. It's very yeah, it was very wing-like. I thought you did it. I thought that was really clever. It was almost perfectly symmetrical too, the way that uh, the actress
And that was a collaboration.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
Andy got that material. We had talked about it earlier. We had seen some similar ones. Andy got the material, and then when I attached it, we were like, Andy was like, it doesn't look quite right. And I tacked the center. I just took and tacked the center to make it look like wings.
And that was all it needed.
Right.
Yep.
And I think the for me, like the fact that it wasn't just some cutout wings and it actually like but it assumed that shape as it kind of billowed, that was it was magical. It was really nice. It
Absolutely.
was really
And
great.
and some major props too. Kelsey is one of those actors. I mean, Leah, we can speak to that in a little bit about actors wearing costumes, but Kelsey is definitely, yeah, Kelsey is definitely one of those actors that knows how to wear clothes, that really, when she gets into a costume, the costume doesn't wear her, she wears it. And as soon as she got those wings on, it changed the way that she moved because she started including those big movements of the arms to simulate the idea of wings flapping. And like she's like, okay, great, I've got these wings, like, and I got to show off the wings, like I have to really make use of it. And like I love that she does stuff like that, that she's like keyed into costumes and the way that they tell a story.
Costume and movement. She's really good at that. I
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember putting the wings on her, but then I was downstairs working, so I didn't see the rehearsals as she developed the wing movements. I just saw the finished product and went, "This is amazing."
Right.
She's so good at that.
Yeah, she was really fascinating with some of her hand gestures too. I remember one scene in particular where I think it was during the ball, but she ends up like doing this kind of like little clap and
Look,
it yeah, and it looked like wings, right? It looks like little like you could imagine like Tinkerbell's wings or something like
yeah.
the rapidity the pace at which she did it it was really suggestive of a tiny little fairy, like it was really cool.
She just thinks about stuff like that. Like, and even if you really pay attention to when she's casting the spells, like
Yeah.
I, I worked with her on that, but a lot of that is just stuff from her brain. Some of it is like there's ballet pantomime that goes into it. So like in ballet, there's no dialogue, so a lot of it is done through hand gestures. So like if you kind of know what to look for, that she's saying a lot of what the spell words are with the gestures, with the wand movement, like I yeah, she's a very brilliant performer. lucky to have her.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of that. The incantations were really traumatic, and that was fun. I actually had a note about the sleep spell. When the evil fairy does the same thing. And it's just, but she has this big rod, right? So her wand is like, you know, I don't know,
A
powerful.
staff.
It's like,
Just
Yeah,
a staff.
yes, I am
yeah,
I am here and you must deal with me, right?
yeah,
Should have invited me to the party.
absolutely. Yeah.
That was fantastic. Yeah, there was another, when the scene where Belle describes, or I'm sorry, not Belle, Rose describes love. Um, that was really great. So where'd you come up with that?
Oh gosh, the how do you know if you're in love?
Yeah.
That was one of the earliest scene ideas that I had when I was sitting down to write this, was the idea of wanting to wanting to talk about have the fairy godmother kind of like counsel her and guide her and talk about the ideas of love. Um, because I knew early on I wanted to tell this story as a love story, and I also knew that uh, part of her Rose's struggle was going to be having her parents constantly throwing suitors at her in this attempt that, like, well, if we get her married off, then when the curse happens, it'll be over quick. That'll be fine. Bing, bang, boom. And her feeling the fatigue about that and kind of feeling like this isn't how it's supposed to work. And the short answer is that love monologue came from an honest place of some things that I wish someone had said to me when I was younger about, like, what is love? Like, how do you know if you're in love? Um, as you growing up and starting to develop feelings and pursue crushes and things like that, I always felt like um I was someone that very young and very quickly I would use the L word. And I remember my parents saying, like, you're too young, you don't know what it is. And I always remember thinking, like, well, somebody tell me what it is. Like, and how do I know for sure, like, that this is the real thing? And years later, as an adult, is being married now, I think the simple truth is exactly what the fairy godmother says, is that no one can tell you, you just know. And additionally, the way that she describes, kind of like, for some people it's like a thunderbolt and they know in an instant, and for others it's like a seed that grows over time until they suddenly realize what's sprouted up inside their hearts. That second one was me, and that was how I found love, and that was the kind of the story of my wife and I falling in love with each other. But I didn't want to discredit the notion of love at first sight, because that is how it is for some people. And I really wanted to kind of give a little bit of that all-inclusive message of, like, it happens differently for everybody. And who am I to tell you, like, that's, you're not in love, you don't know. Like, you know it or you don't.
It's really a tender moment in the play too, and it's almost like it's really close to the center of the play. I mean, it really is the heart of the play
Mm-hmm.
in a sense. Like
Absolutely.
it
Yeah.
and I just I that was a very genuine moment came through. I thought the performance was great, the writing was amazing, and I thought that, it hit me. It definitely hit me. It was
I'm
good.
so glad.
Hmm. Yep. And talking about the suitors, so like the costumes for the suitors and the three different, so you basically have like one who's, rich and wealthy, but basically he's getting some chattel, like a prize or an alliance or something. You have the second one who's kind of like reminded me of like Sir Didymus from like Labyrinth or something. He's very noble, but he's also very old. He's way too old for her. And
Mm-hmm.
but he's the chivalric love, right? The chivalric ideal, and it's almost to the point of, it's to the point of it is all done very in a very funny way. Uh,
Oh yeah.
and then there's just the fop, right? Who's just like, what? He just dances weird, and he's got like the long, like I think Leah did. Well, that must have been a conscious choice. The really long feather right in the cap, and or the really weird, like kind of almost Mad Hatterish hat, right? He has kind of a
Well, the suitors came together again. It was a collaboration because Andy wrote these crazy suitors, and especially the fop were like, okay, we'll see what he does. This is going to be kind of, um, and so partly they were things that I had. The two of the suitors are in very short little puff pants, and those were things I had from another production. They're in tights that belong to the Savoyards, and um, they all have the white, poet shirt, or what is it they call it? A fluffy shirt? No,
A puffy shirt.
a puffy
If
shirt.
we're talking
Yes, that's it.
Seinfeld, yeah.
Right. Um, and but then the rest of it, it was like, okay, we have to make them look kind of crazy. So um, the three doublets they wear are all from different places. Some are borrowed. Michael brought one of them, and then it was really the capes that kind of made the character. The fop character wears a cape that just happened to be there, and he uses it so well. And the other two capes, the crazy red, white, and black one and the blue one, were actually skirts that I bought at a thrift store and cut and made into capes. And then when we were dressing them, Andy was like, they need hats. So we grabbed a couple of hats. Michael actually brought in the hat that the fop wears. And then he brought it in without the feather. And Andy was like, didn't you say it had a feather? So we got the feather on there. And the crazy red, white, and black cape has fur around the collar because Andy just was like, I think it needs fur. And so I saw some tails and things hanging in the costume room there and went, how about this? So it was again a collaboration and lots of fun.
Oh
Yeah,
my
and
gosh.
the fact there's three different styles works. So like, yeah, they're totally different characters, and so they are dressed in completely three different distinct styles. So that worked out great, even though it's like,
Mm,
And we wanted them very colorful, just very crazy, unmatching colors. That was a conscious choice.
absolutely. And I have to say too, another just like all the claps to Leah because I'd seen bits and pieces of each of the three suitors kind of in their stuff. But the first time I saw all three of them together in those outfits acting the roles was on the dress rehearsal, and the curtain opens, and there they all are just being very absurd. And I about died. I
yeah,
thought it was one of the funniest things I ever seen. And I was just like, that's it. That's the look. And it was like, oh, you said all those like little detail things, like that cape that cape with just that little pop of fur collar was like, yep, there it is. Like that's
Mhm.
all it needed. Or like Sam is another one who plays the third suitor, the fop, who wears clothes very, very well. And I remember he was like, can I wear my cape to rehearsal once? And we said, sure. And just the way that he put it on himself and the way that then it informed his movement because he would fling it around. It was
yeah,
just like, oh my goodness.
yeah, yeah.
So, so funny. Like, again,
And
He
the
just,
is so
choreo,
inventive
yep.
and creative that, he'd make anything I put on him work, but it's great to sort of work with him and help make him comfortable enough to do the things he does.
yeah, that was a cool thing too. Kind of like after the first fitting, the three of us kind of getting together and be like, okay, so we had this. I think collectively between myself, you, and Sam, the actor, we're like some of this we weren't fully happy with. Okay, what about this, this, and this? And then we're like, okay, great, there it is. And it was kind of between the three of us working out that.
Well, and the weird thing was Andy and I hadn't even talked about it. And then he was like, "Oh, I don't like this part of it." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I agree. I already got something else for that. Like we
Yeah,
didn't have to."
that was it was a great mind meld moment of like, yes,
Mhm.
we all saw it and we all want to like just zhuzh it a little bit, get it to where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And the choreography, like just the dance choreography in that scene where there are four dancers, four partners, and they go one all the
Yeah.
way around the room in such a small space. Because I think like with Andy and I have done a little bit of I started taking a class with Andy with fight choreography, but like I think a lot of people don't think about like, costume and movement on stage. you've got these big flowing robes. I mean, like, Rose has like this, it's almost down to her ankles sometimes, and so being able to move around in that, and especially in a dance number, right? In something that's choreography, and then the fight scenes as well. I mean, yeah, you guys all have to be on the same page. The actor, the director, the fight director, and the costumer, right?
Yeah.
Especially in this case for the fights.
Yeah.
Sometimes working on other shows, you have to kind of collaborate with the dance choreographer depending on what the movements are. In this show, the dancing wasn't real difficult, so it wasn't so much of an issue. But the fights, the big thing about the fights is they have to be safe. So I can't put
Right.
a costume on them that makes the fight unsafe. And I was actually worried a little bit about the hedge because that costume it's a camo with holes in it, and I was afraid like a sword would get caught. Now, thankfully, that
Mm.
didn't happen, but I had to consider that.
Mm.
And it was awesome the very first night that we choreographed that. We were lucky enough that Leah was working in the costume shop, that she came up and said, like, okay, I've got the fabric right here. Can we try some of that with this? So, so that she knew what that movement was going to look like, and also how we needed to make adjustments, because that was something where it was like a little bit 50-50. Like, I think Leah, you kind of changed the drape of some of those. And then on our end with the fights, we altered some of the moments where there's like a stab or a slash, where we're like, okay, so we need to make sure that's not going to go straight through the costume and get stuck. So how do we adjust that? How do we make that work? And that was really cool. I'm really glad that we were able to catch that really early on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
me
because
too.
the Princeling sword was substantial. I mean, that was a real piece of metal there. That wasn't some like cardboard with some tin
Mm-hmm.
foil on it. That was a serious weapon.
Yes. And we rented that sword from our fight teacher Tanya Lynn, and I'm very grateful that she was able to hook us up there.
Yeah, I was amazed. The other thing that, like, you learn in fight choreography, or I started to learn, is that you're making it look like it's a real fight, but from a certain angle, obviously there's a lot of space between the stroke. You look at it this way, it looks like, oh, you're cutting them. You look like, but really
Yeah.
it's this far apart. But in the black box theater like setup, like there's not a lot of angles that you can use to hide some of these motions. So that was really clever, I thought, the way the choreography worked. So there was a lot of
Mhm.
upstage, downstage stuff. But
Yeah.
did you
It
have
was.
did you have
Oh,
like no, did you have any difficulty like figuring out how much of the stage to use and keeping it away from the audience as well?
yes. I mean, that was something I was very grateful I got a chance to have a conversation with Tanya Lynn, with Adam Rutledge, to kind of talk about the some tips and tricks about choreographing in a small space. And from there, getting into our first fight rehearsal, like really early on, we made the call that in the space, the kind of the stage area has black flooring, and then kind of as it creeps out behind the kind of false proscenium, it's white tiling. And we kind of early on were like, okay, black is our boundary line. That black tile, that's nothing goes past this.
Gotcha.
And then the other thing that we tried to work on were angles and kind of the sense of motion. So there's a lot of stuff that happens on the diagonal just because of that space. That's where you end up getting a lot more room to play. Um, and it was just kind of this game of like working on it, kind of being in the back, and you're like, okay, so like if this rotates in this circle, it gives a lot of movement to the fight without them really having to travel a lot of places.
Hmm.
um yeah. um and like you said, a lot of it was kind of pushing stuff upstage and trying to keep things moving in a way that kept the action not too too much in the audience's lap. We want to make sure that the audience feels safe, as much as we're making the fighters safe.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Cool.
and that's another thing we want to talk about: collaboration with not just with Michael, our fight captain, who I absolutely relied on to make those fights look the way they did. Because I had some ideas, but then I was like, Michael, what do you think? I need something here. And he was also just another set of eyes. But that's another place where costumes really ended up kind of working out beautifully, because the Wicked Fairy has this beautiful cape, which I believe, Leah, is another skirt that was converted into a cape. Am I
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, you are. It has a leather it's a leather weave that goes around her neck. And I found this skirt years ago in a thrift store, cut it in such a way that the leather weave is the neck part and then the skirt hangs behind. And I've used it in, I think, 3 or 4 shows at this point. And it just was perfect for the Wicked Fairy.
I still remember, not to get too derailed, but when we did that first fitting with the cape, where my brain just exploded, because I'm like, that's it. Because we had the dress and we're like, yeah, it needs some bits, it needs some accessories. And then you put the cape on, like, okay, we're building everything else around that cape because it's beautiful. But
And
with, oh, go ahead.
we had to put another scarf. There's a scarf attached to the skirt because it had gold weave through it. The first scarf kept catching on the set in rehearsal and kind of got a little bit shredded. So I have the scarf that you see is the second one that has kind of gold stripes through it. It still works, but it was a different look than the first one. It kept pulling threads, and I was afraid that during the fights she would step on them.
Right.
Right.
We can't have
Right.
that.
That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking of, was that there's all this flowing fabric, and like, how do you keep that up off the ground away from the people's feet, right?
Yeah.
While they're doing their choreography.
Mhm. But the other thing about that cape was that it was a huge boon, because there were little things that we blocked, that suddenly this cape was adding an interesting level of both motion and masking. So like there's a couple parts where, like, the Wicked Fairy, she like throws this big slap and then she kicks him down. And it was that motion of the cape both like gave that fight movement so much more depth. And then also, like, when she did the kick, it kind of helped mask it a little bit. And you didn't even realize, because you saw the kind of the back of her heel kick up against the cape, and then you see him go flying, and it's like, oh my gosh, she's kicked him.
Yes. Yes, that definitely came through. There's no doubt. And
Yeah.
back to just the hedge with the three actresses who were doing the hedge. At first I thought it was all one big, like, solid thing. You got me. I thought, oh, they're holding up like a big piece of cloth, but no, it was all attached to their outfits, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
And
those were like ponchos, basically.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, the camo fabric. And the funny thing is, I didn't know how the heck I was going to do the hedge. I mean, I really didn't have a clue. And I was in Joanne Fabrics just looking for material. And I used to work in Joanne Fabrics. I didn't know they carried this stuff, but the camo fabric is for turkey hunters to create a blind.
right.
And the one lady was like, I've never seen anyone buy this. What are you making? One of the ladies that worked there. And I'm like, a hedge? So I kind of explained to her, but it was the perfect fabric. And then I added to that, and the fact that you could, just cut a hole in the center basically and have it drape on them, and then the way they used it made it look really more complicated than it was.
Well, the way they used it was amazing, but the performance that they gave, like, how long did it take those three actresses to get all of that in unison? It was, for me, it was like watching Macbeth, like the three witches from Macbeth, or actually, I started thinking of the three-headed knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, because you had a reference of the Terpsichorean Muse, which is a line from the Monty Python's cheese shop, right? Sketch. So I was thinking
Yes.
in
Yes.
Monty Python terms for a little bit, but then I thought, no, this is Shakespeare. Like, when they were talking, it was spooky. Like, it was good spooky.
Which, by the way, I didn't realize that I had like gently borrowed that reference to the Terpsichorean Muse from the cheese shop sketch
Oh,
until
you
you were.
didn't? Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
just I just thought, like, referring to the Terpsichorean anything when
Anything.
talking like dance is just
Damn.
such an obtuse and goofy way of talking about it. But thank you for, yes, that absolutely. But yes,
Yeah.
the hedge kind of being like a Shakespearean thing. I was telling Leah this one day. I had some rules with the dialogue, like kind of like loose rules, where I wanted everyone to kind of talk differently than each other. And with the Wicked Fairy and her monsters, I absolutely wanted to evoke that kind of Shakespearean old kind of fairy tale rhythms. And we spent a whole night of rehearsals just with those actors playing the hedge. We sat down and it was almost like doing a music rehearsal, being like, okay, how do we want the tempo for this? Like, where are the stress words? And in doing that, we actually found that some of those lines, I didn't plan for this, but some of them are in meter, almost like Shakespeare. You've got
Like
that
almost
da
like
da 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 rhythm in there.
that makes it so much more hypnotic. It's like a spell, right? It's like
Yeah.
that gives that magical element to it. And I think that was what was so evocative. Yeah.
Yeah, I still get a kick out of whenever they do that first thing because they all start with their heads down and they all raise their heads in unison. They're all speaking in unison. I still get a kick out of hearing the audience kind of or like kind of react to that moment because it's so creepy and it's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing what you can do with three people, all like
Yeah.
just with their emotions and voices. It's such a
Oh,
Oh,
I know. Like major props. That's Kate Morosky, Lindsay Surmas, and Elisa Stuver playing the hedge. They worked really, really hard. And there were a couple times where I was like, hey, guys, work with each other, kind of like circle up and sync up on these lines. Let's make sure we get them real crisp. And they really did a great job with it.
the
and
foppish
it got them
super.
there.
What was that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I said good directing got them there.
Thank
That's
you.
right.
Thank you.
That line that the foppish knight or the foppish suitor says about I wore an onion in my belt as was the fashion of the time. Is that Henry V?
Do you know what? I don't know. It
It,
might be Sam, who plays the third suitor, is a
okay.
master improv actor,
Okay.
and we've worked together on a lot of projects. And he he knows how to take material on a page and just add something, just a little something to it, like that makes it even funnier than what I had written.
Wow.
And that is something I did not script. That is something I just had in the script. It said the third suitor trails off, and
Okay.
he knew exactly what to do to
Okay.
fill that space as he's just kind
Yeah.
of wandering off. And we wore onions on it, but I was like, that's I don't know what that means, but that's hilarious. Please always say that.
There's a scene in I think it's Henry V where I can't remember the character's name, but he's running around with a leek, just an onion, right? Because it's
Yeah.
and it's like this long, and he's like almost like a sword, but it's like flailing around, flopping around, and there's some jokes about that, I'm sure. And then, but it has to do with it's the symbol of the Wales or something. He's Welsh, or it's like I know there's so many
Yeah.
levels of humor. It's a wonder I get any of that from Shakespeare.
No,
But what you
knowing
did
Sam, knowing how
here,
he loved Shakespeare, I'm sure that was an intentional reference.
yeah. But what you did here was like you had that um the Terps Korean, and the when he says, pulchritude, and he's gonna, I'm proposing to you, and she's like, nobody
Yeah.
knows what you're saying, I love that you went there because, you know, it almost lampoons that kind of how do I want to put it? Like that kind of highfalutin language that sometimes you see when you go to a play, but
Yeah.
and and that's some of the things that could make it a little inaccessible, but you turned it and
Hmm.
brought it back as like as a joke and owned it, and it was really fun.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Like I said before, I had my rules, and one of them was that all the characters had to sound different from each other. And trying to characterize each of the three suitors in a different way, realizing that the first suitor, the one that we're talking about, played by Don Gudenberg, was going to be the wealthy one. Like you said, the kind of the one that it's like she's a prize, she's a trophy wife. Um, I realized it'd be funny if he just talks in the most obtuse, unintelligible way possible. And so as I'm writing that scene, I've got my thesaurus out and I'm like, okay, what's the most like four polysyllabic word for just like a simple thing that I can just substitute in there that like nobody knows what he's saying. He just sounds like, he's almost using language what's the word as like to be exclusive
Right.
You know, that's like
Right.
the right of privilege, the privilege of princes to be able to use language that only the elite will understand.
Exactly. That definitely comes across. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, that
And then with the third suitor, it was just like he had to sound ridiculous. My head canon for him was that like he was almost like a Habsburg. Like the family is so inbred that they don't really have a brain cell between them. Um,
yeah,
that's the part that's not
yeah.
necessarily like
Did
for
he
the
have
kids, but
a
that's just
little like affectation in his voice too? Did he do like a lisp kind of thing going on there,
he
like a
did a little
Habsburgian lips lisp?
he did like a little German, like kind of Germanic
Yeah.
accent.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Austrian.
he does a character in some of the dinner theater, like mystery theater shows that we'll do. It's a Christmas show where he'll play Belschnickel. And the joke that he came up with for his character was that because Belschnickel is kind of from all over the place, he would do this accent that was kind of all over the place. It's
Mhm.
like, did it sound Spanish? Did it sound German? Did it sound like it kind of sounded like he was from everywhere? And I realized as I was writing, I inadvertently kind of wrote some of that character voice into the dialogue. So he's like, okay, so that it needs to sound like this, right? And I'm like, yeah, kind of, not too much, but just a little Belschnickel in there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, they're definitely distinctive.
Mm.
Well, those are all the questions that I have. Is there anything that you want to talk about that I didn't cover in
Well, the one thing that I love about the one costume in the show that I love that was sort of accidental, uh, when we first see Rose and she's in the woods and she's in the green and pink and brown, we originally didn't have that costume, and I went to the thrift store going, I need something like this week, and found those pieces. So it's a forest green dress with a pink dress under it and a tan skirt under that and a velvety brown crisscross top. And I saw them in the thrift store. I sent Andy a picture. He's like, yes. So I bought them. And when I put them on her, it didn't even occur to me until they were on her body that it made her look like a rosebud, which was
uh
really cool and completely accidental.
I loved that. I loved how like that just came together in the best way possible. Because we had talked about, do we want her to have, because in the first half of the show, she's running away, she's in the woods. And we were like, oh, do we want to have her in a different dress? Is it going to be more trouble than it's worth? And originally we said, well, we got the pink dress, which Leah did a beautiful job creating this gorgeous pink ball gown. Looks every inch a princess. Um,
Again, a
and
collaboration. Andy and I picked the material together and then I sewed
we
it.
we did, but that was so magical because again, it was sort of like we're in the Joanne's together, just being like this one, nah, this one, nah, this one. Ooh, I like this one. Do you like this one? I like this one. Like, oh, but then we could put this one with this one, and it was a beautiful mind meld. I mean, like I feel like this is just turning into like I love working with you, Leah. Like, and I
Right.
love collaborating with you.
oh, this is
This
good to see.
mutual admiration society that goes on between us.
And we sometimes think with the same brain, so it's fairly easy.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes
Sometimes,
one of us has the brain cell and the other one doesn't. It's nice when we get to have it at the same time.
right.
But yeah, so like that moment where in talking with the actors playing Rose, that kind of feeling like the character needed a different dress for the four scenes, kind of feeling like, well, like what do we have? What's going to work? And Leah, just like you said, costuming is about solving problems, and just the way that you were able to solve that problem was so perfect. And then another actor of us brought in the green cape that she wears over top of it too. So it was
Yes.
just like little things just kind of from all different places coming together to make the right look.
And the greens matched.
That's the
Randomly.
crazy thing, right?
Totally,
I,
again, it was just what was available and it matched. And
yeah.
I call it the costuming gods because I'll go to a thrift store and go, I need something. One time I went to a thrift store and I needed a pair of blue suede shoes in a particular size, and there they were. The right size, the right price, blue suede shoes. What are the chances?
It's
But
amazing.
it works that way sometimes for me. And
Yeah.
I'm not looking a gift horse in the mouth, as they say.
Yeah.
Going,
Right.
okay, great.
Yeah. Well, and another anecdote I have to share, because when we realized this, like, this just tickled me. We spent a lot of time working out what the fairies were going to look like, and it was a lot of back and forth, a lot of like not sure like what was going to be right.
And we
Um,
had different visions of the good fairy.
we
They were
did.
very different.
They were, but like it made me happy where we were able to come to a place where we were both happy with it, and it was something that Kelsey, the actor playing this character, felt really good in too. And then when we put together the Wicked Fairy, looking at the two of them on stage, it was so funny to be like, Leah, these are our two aesthetics, just like at odds with each other. Like I had a very kind of, Renaissance fair meets kind of like classical ballet vision for the fairy. And then I mean, Leah, you can speak to this because you once played the Wicked Fairy in a different production of Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, and I'm an old rock chick. I'm an old rock and roll girl, and I played the Wicked Fairy one time, and they put me in a 1980s black gown, just somebody's prom gown from the 1980s. And so the Wicked Fairy ends up being like with the wig and the whole cape aesthetic, and the whole thing is like rock and roll is like me, and the Good
Mm,
Fairy is ballet and Renaissance fairs, and so it's kind of
yeah.
the us.
I know, and I love that. It's like there it is, because it's another one where too it's like I'm like, oh, and then we've got all of these rings on the Wicked Fairy. Like who else do we know that like yeah. Well, and
Well,
do you know what's funny too?
that was actually a great device as well. So those giant costume rings, my wife and I often go to shows and stuff. We buy these little trinkets and things, and I got some of these really oversized ones. But the ones that was the Wicked Witch was where the Wicked Fairy, she had these ones that were this big. But at one point, she meets Rose, and she's gonna like offer her a spindle, and she's covered, and so we know it's her because she puts her hand out and she's got that ring on, that giant ring that you can't mistake. And
Mm.
so yeah, it's wonderful when the props and the plot, when all that kind of stuff comes together. It's just fantastic
Yeah.
use of it.
Oh yeah. And it's funny, that was something until we did that with the full dress, I didn't even realize that was like a visual that I had been thinking about for a while. We're like, oh, it'd be really cool. We got the Wicked Fairy in this like old woman disguise. And then when she holds out her hand, the audience recognizes the rings on her finger.
Right.
But another thing about the jewelry too, this is a cool thing that was kind of not really to do with a collaboration between myself and Leah, but just something that the actors actually came up with. Was the necklaces that the two fairies wear.
Mm.
So Leah was able to find this lovely crystal, like clear crystal pendant for the good fairy to wear on a silver chain. And previously, L. Connolly Thomas, who plays the Wicked Fairy, had brought in this like amethyst crystal that she was going to wear with her costume as well. And the neat thing was, it was almost like, the Wicked Fairy's got a lot of silver accents, and then the Good Fairy's wearing like this jewel that has some silver to it, and all the Good Fairy stuff has kind of got this purple tint to it, and the Wicked Fairy's necklace has purple in it, and the two of them kind of work this out. It's like these were the gifts that we exchanged each other before we were at odds with each other. And so now whenever Kelsey on stage talks about the Wicked Fairy, talks about her sister, she'll kind of touch that necklace, that pendant, almost like remembering who gave that to her. And it's like it's a little detail thing, and it's something, again, it's costumes telling the story, but it's cool to watch, like, what do the actors then do with the stuff that they're given, and how do they then use that to further the story, even if it's something the audience doesn't necessarily pick up on.
Right.
Yeah, I loved that. When they told me that, I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. Like, yes, that's what it
And
is.
I didn't know that until just now. It
I'm
is
like, isn't
cool.
that awesome though, Leah?
Yeah.
Like that they were just like, that's what it is. That's the story
Mhm.
behind that thing. And I love it
That's
when actors
amazing.
can, yeah. Oh, I love that.
And there's what's really, I don't know, in art and painting and that sort of thing, when you add an element, right? So if you have like a part of a canvas that is mostly one color, and then you add a little bit of the other part of the canvas into it. So it's almost like the yin yang symbol where there's a little dot of
Yeah.
white in the black and the black and the white. So you had that with the purple and the clear. That's really wonderful, just stylistically, just as
Yeah.
Well, and
it
I think it's
makes it a
interesting
whole.
that sometimes certain productions don't seem to think costumes are that important and they don't spend a lot of time on them. And until you see I once saw a musical that I didn't know the story of. The costumes weren't well done. And I was confused as to what time frame I was in, who these characters were, because people on stage were dressed in everything from like 1960s to 1940s kind of, and I didn't know what my era was, what year it was. Some people came across the back in like black leggings and white men's shirts. I'm like, who are they supposed to be? And you don't realize until you see something you don't know the story of how much costumes contribute.
Sure.
And an actor, part of my job is to make the actors comfortable on stage in what I give them to a point. And what they can then take and do character wise with what I give them is what a costume is supposed to do.
No,
Absolutely.
I think it's a great point. If I don't know this character, I'm going to judge. Before I hear a character speak, whether I know it or not, my brain is already making assumptions about what I'm seeing. So the costume is the first thing, right? That I'm seeing. That's what I'm
Mhm.
going to notice first. Then I might notice the actor's hand gestures, face, something like that. But the very first thing I'm going to see is, the clothing, and that's in it. And especially when you have a play like this where you do have archetypes, right? So
Yeah.
that has to work, right? You have to
Hmm.
have, there's a division there.
And you can
And that
only
was,
break, oh,
oh, go
sorry,
ahead,
go.
Leah.
No, I was going to say you can only break sort of, if you were costuming Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, you can't not put her in blue gingham. Like you can't now.
Right.
Um, there may have been a time when you could, but everybody knows it. There are certain things you can't break with certain
Right.
characters.
Yeah. But and that was, costuming is so important to me. I love costumes. And that was I remember early conversations with Leah. Like we would just be getting together and just being like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this and this and this? And like, this is I feel like we've been brainstorming and just kind of like, going away at different like elements of this for a while now. And it's a big reason why I wanted Leah to be part of this project, not just because Leah and I are very good friends, but because Leah is such a good costumer, and also because we're good friends, we do work really well together and we collaborate well.
Mhm.
And more often than not always, we kind of have the same like vision and aesthetics. Sometimes we don't, and that's okay. And it's been very cool to kind of like work through those. Like, okay, I'm seeing this, you're seeing this, where do we go from there? Like what's the best middle ground? Like how do we, as you said, how do we solve this problem? And I've loved getting to do that with you because it's just the look of the show is so beautiful. Like I can't stop. Like I keep going through like on Facebook and everywhere else, kind of looking at the pictures of the show, just being like, it looks like a storybook come to life. And that's my biggest vision for this, was I want it to feel like you're looking at an illustration on a page almost.
And I'm so like I've really enjoyed working on this, and I'm happy that Andy is happy. That was what I wanted to make sure I did. But sometimes I've made a director happy with what they wanted, but I'm not happy with it. I give them what they want. But this time, both have happened. Andy's happy with it, and I am happy with everything that I have on the stage. So,
Yeah.
and my earliest memory of Andy was a costume. When we first met, I was costuming him, and he was like, "Oh, I have these boots, and I have this, and we can." And it was already like, "Oh, this guy knows costumes, and this is going to be great because he has some stuff that we can add." And that is my first memory of working with Andy.
That's
Cool.
my first memory working with you too. And I was so glad that you didn't just like shove me to one side, being like, stop talking. Because I was
I was
just
like,
so excited to be like, hey, like I like, can I help? Can I like bring some stuff to the table? Like it's so funny that like our relationship began from a place of collaborating on a costume. We're like, hey, can I help with this?
And I was like, this guy gets it. And he doesn't
Yeah.
mind that I'm giving him pink pants.
Oh no, yeah, well, that's the thing. So we were working together on a pirate show, and uh, it was Sean Raleigh's Pirate's Tale, and it had been going on the Gateway Clipper for it'd been 2 years at that point. So they were using the same costume. So I'd gotten to see the years prior what they had done, and I was like, okay, well, they're probably going to put me in one of these. And so I'm looking at Facebook, being like, which one would I want? And I'm looking at the one that's got the pink pants, and I'm like, that one. And then Leah's like, I want you to put on this one. She hands me the pink pants, and I probably like I don't know what my reaction was, but it was probably just restrained giddiness because I'm like, I got big pants.
I don't honestly remember. What I remember is you're like, oh, and I have some boots and I have this. And I was like, huh, this is easy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was fun,
I love it.
and it still is. Like getting to do this was a blast.
Yes.
Well, you can tell that a lot of love went into it, and
Mhm.
it definitely comes across. There's no doubt. It's very heartful.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think this is probably a good place to wrap it up. So thanks for being here, and everybody go out and see the show. It was an amazing show. I'm going to go one more time, and
Woohoo.
yeah. So I'll see you guys there.
All
All right.
right.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thank
Pat.
you.
Have a great
Bye,
day.
Pat.
Mhm.